I am finally getting back to my board game roots. The Horrified series of board games has been a fan favorite since it launched back in 2019. They are light to medium weight, fully standalone co-op board games where 1 to 5 players race to outsmart a rotating cast of iconic monsters. Previous games focused on the universal movie themes like The Bride of Frankenstein and Dracula. We've had entries focusing on the Greek gods and American folklore, and monsters from around the world. But this time, we have foes from Dungeons & Dragons. You'll be facing some combination of a Beholder, Displacer Beast, Mimic, and Red Dragon. And yes, they all have unpainted minis in the box. Previous entries have been able to find a good balance between accessibility and thematic battles where each monster feels distinct. So let's see how this latest entry in the series stacks up, and if it's a fun side quest from our main D&D campaigns. With thanks to Ravensburger for sending it along, let's take a look at Horrified Dungeons & Dragons. Enhance and improve your 5e games today with Hit Point Press. Explore the cute but deceptively deep campaign setting of Humblewood, where a new threat imperils the peace between the Humblefolk and the Birdfolk. Or enhance your 5e games with animated spell, condition, and townsfolk cards. Add a slew of creative and gorgeously illustrated magical items with the Griffin Saddlebag. And face down more than 30 innovative 5e villains with their big book of big bads. Learn more today at Hit Point Press by using our link in the corner or down below. You start off with each player choosing a character. They each get special abilities based on a roll of the d20. The cleric is able to protect characters and blunt enemy attacks. The fighter can quickly move to foes and tank for you. The rogue can collect the all-important items around the map and distribute them to allies. And the bard can help the rest of the party and the NPCs move quickly around the map while also slowing down enemies. And finally, the wizard can teleport folks, though where they end up teleported to is mostly random. Once you choose your heroes, you get to choose your enemies. There are 4 to choose from, like I said, the Displacer Beast, the Mimic, the Beholder, and the Red Dragon. You typically choose 2 to fight at the same time, though you can go for more if you want quite a challenge. And if you have the other versions of Horrified, you can mix and match monsters, and they're all theoretically compatible, though I haven't been able to test that out myself. Now, before I get into how each enemy operates, let me give you just a brief overview of the gameplay. Each round, each character will have 4 actions. They can choose to move, pick up items, move NPCs, share items with other players, fight a monster, or use our special ability. You can do them in any order, and you can do one action multiple times if you want to. And during the enemy turns, you draw cards to dictate which monsters activate, which NPCs emerge from their hidey holes, and what special events might occur. So your heroes will be running around the map, collecting resources in the form of items, helping NPCs move from one place to another safely, and fighting off the monsters. It feels a little bit like Pandemic, where everyone is frantically trying to put out fires before things get out of control. So for the monsters, each one behaves differently and has different requirements to defeat them. The Displacer Beast is hard to pin down. You have to collect items around the board, come to the Displacer Beast's location, and use those items to cover up spaces on its little game mat. The strength of the item determines which spaces you're allowed to cover up, and once you cover up 5 of those spaces, you can start trying to defeat it, though you have to discard a certain number of items to attack it each time. So when you attack, if you roll a number that's covered up by an item on that monster mat, then you defeat it. So the more squares you can cover up, the better your odds. Meanwhile, the Displacer Beast is going to move around the map and attack those heroes and attack the NPCs. Now, for the Beholder, it has 10 different attacks they can do based on each of its little eye stalks. When you attack it, you discard an item, roll a die, and the result determines how many eye stalks you can damage. You can choose which ones you want to damage each time based on the state of your game at the time, so which one's the biggest threat. Once you've damaged each eye stalk, all 10 of them, you can then bring enough items over to defeat the Beholder entirely. Meanwhile, it's using its eye stalks and its eye rays to cause all sorts of chaos and destruction around your map. The Mimic has its own little location that it runs around in, safe from the heroes, but when it lands on certain spaces, it draws an item, and if all players have a matching color item, they discard those, and the Mimic appears on the game board and is able to be defeated. So this one requires the players to coordinate their items to ensure that everyone has a variety at any given time. Meanwhile, the Mimic is hoovering up items from around the board itself, making that task harder. And finally, the Red Dragon. The dragon is a whole freaking quest in itself. First, the team has to find the Vault of the Orb of Dragonkind. and then they have to discard items there to solve a little shifting tiles puzzle that's different every time you play. And then they have to find the dragon's hoard location and bring items there, including that orb, to lure the dragon back, and then they defeat it there. The dragon is the only monster in the set to make use of the layer mechanic, which makes the players visit different locations to find the correct layer. The game recommends starting with the Displacer Beast and the Beholder as your foes, and that's what we did for pretty good success. The game felt pretty challenging without being too overwhelming. The other mechanics we haven't talked about yet include the little NPCs and the perk cards. NPCs are spawned during the monster phases, and they have places that they want to travel to, but they don't move independently. A hero has to go escort them or scoot them along, and if they're killed by an enemy, it raises the terror track, which can eventually end the game. Same as if a hero is knocked out. But if you successfully deliver the NPC, you get a perk card, which is basically a favor from a powerful Water Davian, like the Blackstaff, Rainier Neverember, Laurel Silverhand, among quite a few others. These perk cards can be played to achieve powerful effects like you can see here. When you defeat the enemies, you win. If the terror track reaches its max through killing NPCs, knocking out heroes, and other effects, then the heroes lose. This game was designed by Peter Lee, who actually worked at Wizards of the Coast for 10 years, where he worked on the D&D miniatures and 5th edition. He was also the designer of the premier D&D board game and my personal favorite, Lords of Waterdeep, which I have back here, among others. Now, we had quite a lot of fun with this one ourselves, and I think we will definitely be bringing it out again to share with our other little goblins when they come by to visit. I think it sits in that zone halfway between an Ameritrash and European-style game. Ameritrash games are known for being mostly dependent on luck and random rolls, where European games try to focus more on skill and strategy. The introduction of the D20 into the Horrified system definitely ups the luck and random factor. Characters will take their special actions, roll the die, and then have to adjust their strategy accordingly. But at least for us, this never really felt frustrating. Almost all the results were useful in some way, and we often had ways of mitigating bad luck with clever uses of other players' abilities. Personally, I'm more a fan of European-style games. Looking back at my neglected Board Game Geek profile, my favorites are Roll for the Galaxy, La Granja, Alchemist, and Orleans, if that helps you get a sense for my taste. But those games aren't super accessible to people who don't play a lot of complex board games. Horrified, I think, is accessible to anyone, and they did a great job of making the game feel thematic for the most part. When you're engaging in the mechanics, it mostly feels like you're doing heroic things in the town of Waterdeep, though there are moments when you question how tossing a candle at a beholder kills off one of its eye stalks. But each of the 4 enemies felt unique, and being able to mix and match them really ups the replayability of the game. I'm eager to get it back to the table to see how that red dragon plays, because that's the one I didn't have an opportunity to try out yet. And let me just call out the components, because they're across the board amazing. The attention to detail in this game is just fantastic. The little character tiles being banners, so they like this, and on the back they're just banners, and they're all cut out a little bit differently. They have different shapes, which I didn't even notice until I started putting this little video together. And I appreciate that they're quite heavy cardboard rather than like flimsy cardstock. And the back of the enemy cards here, where you get the enemy mechanics, is the cover of the Bestiary of Volotham Gadarm. Yes, it breaks with the naming convention of Volo's Guide to Monsters or Volo's Guide to Waterdeep, but it's still a nice touch. And the back of the game board is a mimic. They didn't need to do that. Most of the players are never even going to see it, but they added it in, and it's just fun. And all of the art is really gorgeous. It's been a long time since I took art history, but the portrait art on the character cards is this cool sort of art deco design with lots of really lovely little details. And the tarot style art on the perk cards is also really fantastic. The standees are in more of a standard fantasy art style, but they're also quite nice, and I'm fairly certain all this art in this game is original. They didn't just grab pre-existing Wizards of the Coast art and paste it into the game pieces, which they very easily could have done. That's what most games do. The standees you can totally just bring over to your D&D games if you want to. And even the dice are nicer than typical board game dice, with a nice marbling effect on the D6s and some glitter in the translucent D20. And the map is so gorgeous, featuring major Waterdeep locations, plus the Willowwood and the Undermountain and Skullport. If you're a longtime D&D player, the locations and the details on the map are going to make you smile. I can see these games sparking memories of old adventures that the players are going to want to talk about while they play. Now, some locations do look pretty similar to each other, particularly in Waterdeep. So for your first few games, you're going to be spending a lot of time like scanning the board, trying to find the right place to drop that item you just drew out of the bag. Now, the minis themselves are kind of just serviceable. I don't think anyone is going to be taking these out and using them in the regular D&D games, partially because only the Mimic is the right size. They're all medium-sized minis with 1-inch bases, aside from the Dragon, which is on a large-size base. I mean, they're not bad. You can certainly paint them up, and I think they'd be just fine, but they're not the kind of minis that you want to buy the whole board game just to get the minis for. The only real criticism I have of the game is in the instructions. You can tell that they tried to make them as parsimonious as possible. Most of us don't like to have to read a novel or watch an hour-long Rodney Smith video in order to play a game. But in this case, I think they were succinct to a fault. A few things were just a little bit confusing. For example, the layer cards. In the setup portion of the instructions, it tells you to put the 4 little layer cards randomly in certain locations on the map, and then they don't really mention them again. And that's because they're only used for the Red Dragon. If you aren't playing the Red Dragon mission, you don't need to place layers at all, but the instructions didn't tell you that. Now, the little rules issues like that really only come into play during your first playthrough. After that, you'll probably have worked out any confusion because the game really isn't all that complex. But I did have to turn to Google once or twice to make sure that we were doing things correctly the first time we played. So if you are looking for a modestly complex D&D game that's fun, thematic, accessible, and gorgeously produced, I think you're going to have a great time with Horrified. Even Grady liked it, and he is a really tough critic. I don't really have a scoring system here at the Gallant Goblin. Maybe I should make one. But for now, let's just say that this game gets the Gallant Goblin seal of approval. Dungeons & Dragons Horrified is available now for just 30 to 35 bucks. I was a little bit shocked that it wasn't at least 50 considering how nice all the components are. And that makes it a great gift for the holidays too at that price. And before I wrap up, I wanted to throw a shout out to Ravensburger for throwing in a few extra items into the box for me. They included a nice soy candle, which I thought I had here somewhere. There it is. Yeah, this little candle here from Cantrip Candles. And I'm all about using candles to add the sense of like dungeons and harbors and bakeries and forests to my games. So if you're interested in candles like that, Cantrip Candles is pretty cool. And they also gave me this Dungeons & Dragons Monster Mystery Pen. You can get a Beholder, an Owlbear, a Mimic, a Red Dragon, and each of those has variants for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th editions. Plus there's a sterling silver chase pins that you can get. So I thought we could just open this up together and see what we get. So let's see if I can figure out how to open the box without completely destroying it right this time. But we have an Owlbear. That's a pretty good one, Owlbear. I like that. This is the, looks like 3rd edition Owlbear from the art on the back of the box. So yeah. Very cool. So thank you to Ravensburger for sending us the game and all these little goodies. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Hit Point Press for sponsoring this video. If you're looking for a card-based take on D&D that focuses on storytelling, check out our preview of One Last Fight from Hit Point Press up there in the corner right now. And that's it for me today. Please, at home, stay safe, have fun, love each other, and I'll see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.